how money actually gets sent between countries. When you hear about like international payments, because there'll be a whole different way to do it than what we're used to.
Yeah, that's a big question these days.
Well, today we're diving into China's digital currency.
Right, the eCNY.
The eCNY, exactly. And this big question you've probably seen, is it actually like going around SWIFT? We've been going through articles and reports on the tech, the geopolitics, all that. So the goal for our deep dive today, to cut through the hype and really get what this digital RMB means for global finance without getting lost in all the technical stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're looking at tech that could change how payments work really fundamentally. So it makes sense that people are wondering how it'll shake things up, with the systems we've already got. And the sources we've been looking at, they give us a few different angles on how this is all playing out.
Cool. So for ages now, international payments have pretty much relied on SWIFT. Can you quickly remind folks what SWIFT actually is and why there's this whole buzz about finding alternatives?
So SWIFT. It's basically a network that lets financial institutions around the world send messages to each other securely. You can almost think of it like a super secure messaging app just for banks.
Okay.
But here's the thing. It can take a while for transactions to go through, like 3 to 5 days sometimes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And often you have a bunch of banks in the middle acting as like go-betweens.
Yeah.
And that all adds up, it makes it more expensive.
Right. Makes sense. So then you have the digital RMB coming in, and it's being presented as this faster, cheaper way to move money internationally.
Yeah.
What's the main difference in how it actually works?
Well, the digital RMB uses blockchain technology.
Okay.
And this lets transactions happen almost instantly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it can really cut down the costs because you can get rid of some of those middlemen banks. They've been doing pilot projects in places like Hong Kong and Abu Dhabi, and they've seen settlement times drop down to just seconds with much lower fees. So that's a pretty big change compared to how long SWIFT can take.
Huge, yeah. Now, I've also heard about CIPS. That's China's own payment system, right?
Right.
So is that like their direct way to totally bypass SWIFT?
So CIPS stands for Cross-Border Interbank Payment System. It's China's system specifically for transactions done in RMB. And yeah, it's definitely meant to be a competitor to SWIFT. It's got its own separate messaging infrastructure.
Okay.
But here's the interesting part. CIPS still relies on SWIFT for a chunk of its messaging.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it does give you another way to make payments in RMB, but it's not fully cutting out SWIFT right now.
Gotcha. So it's not like one is completely replacing the other yet. And didn't I also see something about China actually working with SWIFT?
Yeah, so the People's Bank of China, they've actually set up this joint venture with SWIFT and some other Chinese organizations, which kind of suggests they've got a more complex plan going on. Like they're developing their own systems, but they're also still working within the existing global setup. It's not a simple us versus them kind of competition.
Interesting. Now, there's been all this talk about $1.2 trillion in like cross-border digital RMB transactions. What's the truth behind that number?
So that $1.2 trillion number, that likely refers to the potential amount of trade that could be done in digital RMB with certain regions.
Okay.
Specifically places where the digital RMB is gaining some ground, like ASEAN countries in the Middle East. The actual total value of all digital RMB transactions that have happened so far, most of which have been within China, by the way, reached something like $980 billion to $1 trillion by the middle of 2024.
Wow.
So that $1.2 trillion figure, it's more about the projected size of future use in those key trading partnerships, not so much the actual amount that's been settled in cross-border payments right this second.
Gotcha. That puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
So what are China's big goals with this digital RMB?
Yeah.
Both inside their own country and on the world stage?
Well, within China, they want a system that's more efficient than cash. They want to lower transaction costs for businesses and increase financial inclusion so more people have access to financial services.
Okay.
Plus, they want better ways to crack down on any shady financial stuff going on. But internationally, their goals are bigger. They want to challenge how dominant the US dollar is. They want to promote the RMB as a global currency, boost their own financial independence, and make trade easier within things like their Digital Silk Road initiative. Think about projects like that China-Laos Railway. The digital RMB could streamline how payments happen along that whole infrastructure route.
Right. So it's not just about payments, it's about influence too.
Exactly.
So what are the pluses and minuses of this whole shift potentially?
Well, some potential benefits are obvious, like lower costs, faster transactions. There's even the possibility that China and its partners could use it to get around sanctions.
Mm.
And it could lead to moving away from relying so much on the US dollar and SWIFT.
Yeah, diversifying a bit.
Right. But the challenges are big, too. They got to build trust internationally. They got to work through all these different countries' regulations.
Yeah.
And then there's the fact that China's capital controls still make the RMB less appealing globally. Plus, there are concerns about privacy with the central bank digital currency.
So a mixed bag in some ways. Now, what about this mBridge thing? What's the significance of that?
So Project mBridge, it's a collaboration between the central banks of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, the UAE, and now Saudi Arabia, too.
Wow.
Yeah, they're all exploring how to use these central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, for payments across borders.
Okay.
And the digital RMB is a major player in this. The idea is to build a platform for international payments that are more efficient using digital versions of different countries' currencies.
That's ambitious. So where do we actually see the digital RMB being used for these cross-border payments right now?
Mostly within ASEAN countries, the Middle East, and Hong Kong. They're
Right.
running these pilot programs there. We've even seen real-world stuff like Thailand's first oil trade getting settled in digital RMB, so it's happening.
Oh, that's pretty cool. All right, so to sum it all up for us.
So yeah, the digital RMB, it's definitely developing into an alternative to those traditional systems like SWIFT.
Mm.
And it's got some clear advantages,
Yeah.
but it's not like a simple swap right now. And that $1.2 trillion figure, that's more about what could be in the future, not what's actually happening at this very moment. China's got big goals internationally for their digital currency. But the global financial landscape is huge and complex. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Totally. So here's a thought to leave you with. As these digital currencies keep evolving and becoming more widespread, what are the things that will really determine who the major players in global finance end up being? And how might those shifts change international trade and the balance of economic power in the years to come? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.